Welcome back, everybody. Well, just over 25 years ago, a then unknown entrepreneur named Jeff Bezos set up a small online book company in his garage. He called that company Amazon. But in the past few decades, a business initially funded by a loan from his parents has grown into a brand so ubiquitous, it is hard to imagine modern society without it.
Our next guest delves into Amazon and its founder in his fascinating new book, Amazon Unbound, Jeff Bezos and the Invention of a Global Empire. Author and journalist Brad Stones joins us today. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right, Brad, so this is actually your second book about Amazon and Jeff Bezos. And since that first book, the company's worth has gone from already a staggering $120 billion to now 1.7 trillion and continuing to grow. They also went from 150,000 employees, already a lot, to over 1.3 million. Those early days, we remember the company started as like a book and retail Kindle store, and now it is everything from, oh my gosh, a space travel. It is just retail on overdrive. So this kind of growth, should we be impressed by this, or is this something that we should really be concerned about?
That's a good question, Mel. I mean, I think the answer is both, right? It's an impressive entrepreneurial achievement, incredible by any measure. We tend to celebrate the successes of these kinds of historic entrepreneurs, Ford, Rockefeller, and certainly Jeff Bezos is now among those. But there are causes for concern. I mean, you have a company that's now nearing a $2 trillion market cap. The aggregation and accumulation of wealth and power among the big tech companies, it's kind of a feature of the internet that like the winners keep winning, is concerning. And I think there are plenty of reasons to criticize Amazon, its relationship with its employees who often feel exploited, the way in which it treats the sellers on its platform. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, and it's one of the reasons why the company is being scrutinized on both sides of the ocean.
So you wrote extensively about what it's like to actually work alongside Jeff Bezos. And I think I do it. I'm making a lot of assumptions about what kind of a leader he might be. But you spoke to many employees who worked for him over the decades. How did they describe him as a boss?
It's really changed. I would talk about the early Bezos and maybe the more modern Bezos. Early Jeff was a little bit like Steve Jobs, impetuous, demanding, capable of the really cutting comment. But he evolved as a leader. I think he's like a little more decorous, and but things haven't changed. Which he sets high bars. He expresses his disappointment sometimes by walking out of meetings. And he continually pushes the company in new directions. And that's reflected in how dramatically it's evolved over the years, from a retailer, as you mentioned, to an enterprise computing company, a voice computer company that makes the Alexa, a company that's now trying to launch satellites and get into healthcare. That's all because of Bezos's ambition and his restlessness.
Okay, let's talk more about that leadership, because you talk about those early kind of off-the-rails style of leadership of his past, but then he still shows a lot of dissatisfaction, but it's perhaps evolved. So one of the ways that you write about is that he emails a single question mark to people, which just it makes me, I don't even know what that makes me do. But if he sends you that, what did you discover that it means?
Right. Yeah, these are called the escalation emails inside Amazon. And we should note, he's now given up the CEO role. So I'm curious as to whether he'll continue to be sending those kinds of emails. But his email address is very public, jeff@amazon.com. And, he can't manage the whole business as closely as he once did. So what he did over the years is when he would get a customer complaint or notice something himself, he would just forward that email, sometimes with a single question mark, sometimes with a WTF or another exclamation, to the executive in charge. And when you got that email, yes, your blood pressure immediately skyrockets. And basically, it's your responsibility to investigate the issue and provide a satisfying answer that then moves back up the chain, back to Bezos inside the company.
Well, we can't talk about Amazon without talking about its role in the pandemic. And it really did become a lifeline for people around the world. It also, of course, has been criticized widely for the dangerous conditions in its fulfillment centers. The company revealed that nearly 20,000 of its employees tested positive for COVID in 2020. So considering all this, what do you think will be the biggest headline about Amazon as we come out of this pandemic?
I think the headline you mentioned, it's like a dual headline. I mean, on the one hand, the pandemic was an accelerant for Amazon. The company's employment roles, its revenues just skyrocketed during this period. But again, like a lot of other companies, it had to sort of force employees onto the front lines to take some risks. And look, I devote the last chapter of my book, Amazon Unbound, to how Amazon navigated the pandemic. I think they did a lot of things right. Certainly some of the scientists they hired, external scientists, were pretty impressed by the money the company spent. But at the same time, you had employees expressing concern and then Amazon dismissing and firing some of those whistleblowers. So, on the one hand, it's more vital and successful than ever. And on the other hand, I think the pandemic crystallized how difficult and sometimes unempathetic an employer could be. And just last point, Amazon's recognized this, and in Bezos' last letter to shareholders, he said basically we have to do a better job for our employees. And I think that was very much a result of the pandemic.
It's interesting that he writes that on his way out, because one of the threads throughout his leadership has been his very firm anti-union stance, for example. He also set up a lot of initiatives that would discourage employees from staying at the company for too long. And he was even once famously quoted as saying that if Amazon ever ends up in the 100 best places to work list, that the company has done something wrong. I mean, can you please explain that mentality?
Right. No, and that's a quote I have in my book from a former human resources executive. Bezos never wanted employees to get too comfortable. He thought if they were too wealthy or stayed at Amazon for too long, that they wouldn't be trying as hard. He created all these internal mechanisms within the company to keep people kind of lean and moving quickly and trying hard. And I do think it seems kind of heartless. But, the one thing that you have to understand is that people can order from Amazon 24/7. It's an around-the-clock store that's always open. And so they have to eliminate bottlenecks in their warehouses and in the transportation network. And that means keeping employees flexible, sometimes forcing them into overtime. And they always saw unions as an impediment to that flexibility. And it will be interesting. It's one of the biggest challenges for Andy Jassy going forward. Will workers organize and kind of force some of the limitations that the Amazon's been fighting against for so many years?
So the question you ponder throughout the entire book is whether the world is better or worse off having Amazon in it. After all your research on this global empire, what do you think?
And Cynthia, at the end of the book, I punt on it a little bit because I say, I basically say, look, I mean, this is our reality. Amazon's not going away. The internet's not going away. Personally, we're Prime customers in this household. We have Alexa devices. We watch Prime TV shows and movies. Like, it would be hypocritical if I was to answer no. I think it is probably, in net, good for society. It represents a lot of the growth and efficiencies of the internet. It saves us time. A lot of tech companies take our time. Amazon doesn't. But that doesn't mean that the company hasn't made mistakes. It has, and I chronicle those, and I think the company should do a better job of serving the communities where it operates and its employees.
Wow, the book is called Amazon Unbound. Brad, an absolutely fascinating read. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, guys.
It's available everywhere. We'll be back after this.